This episode is brought to you by Discover. It's smart to always have a few financial goals. And here's a really smart one you can set: earning cash back on what you buy every day. With Discover, you can. Get this. Discover automatically matches all the cash back you've earned at the end of your first year. Seriously, all of it. Discover trusts you to make smart decisions. After all, you listen to this podcast. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
You may get a little excited when you shop at Burlington.
What a low price! You see that? They have my favorite brand! It's like a whole new Burlington! I can buy two!
I'm saving so much! Yeah!
Burlington saves you up to 60% off other retailers' prices every day. Will it be the low prices or the great brands? Burlington. Deals? Brands? Wow! I told you so. Styles and selections vary by store.
There's this snippet of video from last week that I think is so indicative of our political moment.
All right, now, so we've got a lot of activity down here in the first row.
It was recorded in the State Department briefing room Thursday afternoon. Donald Trump had just announced that Secretary of State Marco Rubio was going to be taking on a new title, National Security Advisor.
Do you know how long he's going to be serving in both roles?
It is clear that I just heard this from you.
The way the spokesperson is totally caught off guard here is really something to behold. It's like she's been treading conversational water, and the reporter just tossed her a lead weight.
Yeah, so that is the miracle of modern technology and the social media. So that is an exciting moment here. I think that, as I know Secretary Rubio, this is a man who, as I think you all know, has worn several hats from day one in managing the nature of what's happening.
To be fair, the State Department spokesperson is right about this. Marco Rubio is a remarkably busy guy. As departments have been downsized or purged, Rubio has picked up one title after another. He's in charge of USAID. He is supervising the National Archives. But the last person to be both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor was Henry Kissinger. And many people think he failed.
It's really a telling moment, right?
Slate's Justin Peters has been considering Marco Rubio's sudden rise.
I don't profess to be an expert on organizational behavior or how to make Washington work, but I do know that you can't give one guy 4 separate jobs and expect that guy to do any of them well, especially when that guy is Marco Rubio.
At this point, you may be thinking, maybe Justin just doesn't like Marco Rubio. And you would not be wrong about that. But plenty of folks have pointed out that as a legislator, Rubio did not exactly cover himself in glory. He had a poor attendance record. Even President Trump called Rubio lazy.
Either he has caught a new wind and is working harder than he ever has, burning the candle at literally every possible end, or he's just half-assing every single job that he has because there's no way that even an incredibly motivated person can do all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, the New York Times has compared Marco Rubio to a Christmas tree bedecked with shiny ornaments of every shape and size. Is that the analogy you would use?
I think back to when he was running for president, and there were all of those stories about how bad his personal finances were, how he routinely ran into debt and made unwise purchases and commingled personal funds with campaign funds. And I'm thinking, in his mind, is he just picking up extra shifts to bring in more money? Because that makes as much sense as anything, that Marco Rubio is saying yes to all these extra jobs just for the meager salary bump that each additional position provides.
There was one more piece of tape that really struck me as I was looking into Marco Rubio and his relationship with Donald Trump in this second administration. It's from just last week.
Well, good morning. This is a beautiful day. We could not have asked for a more beautiful day than this.
There was a
maybe that means
day of
something
prayer
brings us
event that Donald Trump was hosting in the Rose Garden.
Thanks as well to the great people that are here. Pete Hegseth.
But when he got to Marco Rubio, he seemed genuinely excited to talk about him.
Marco Rubio, unbelievable. Unbelievable, Marco. When I have a problem, I call up Marco. He gets it solved.
He seemed to have genuine affection for Marco Rubio, which just seems like such a difference from, say, 2016, when Trump coined the phrase Lil Marco.
Trump has genuine affection to anyone who will be genuinely obsequious to him, right? And I think he's got extra affection for people who once resisted him and have since bended the knee.
Today on the show, how Marco Rubio became secretary of everything? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today? Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. And that's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you can save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states and situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
You wrote this article for Slate that was titled What Happened to Marco Rubio? And I feel like to answer that question sufficiently on the show, it'll help to explain Marco Rubio's rise, like who he was before Donald Trump. So where would you start the Marco Rubio story?
You got to start with his parents, who came to Miami from Cuba in the waning days of the Batista regime.
He said they were political refugees, which they were not, right?
He used to say that during his early runs for office until the Washington Post made it very clear that they had not been exiled by Castro, but left of their own volition. And it's possible that, they saw which way the winds were blowing in Cuba and got out before, they were forced out. But, with Rubio, he will always take that extra rhetorical step and claim something as true that when you go and actually dig into it, the truth doesn't always line up directly with the rhetoric. But Rubio was born in 1971, and, his family was poor. They bounced around a lot. Rubio got pretty bad grades in high school, went to play college football for a year at a school in Missouri that no longer exists, went back to Miami, got his bachelor's, enrolled in law school at Miami, and then set about trying to accumulate enough friends to make a run for political office.
How did he decide, I want to go into politics?
For someone for whom his greatest talent is his mouth, it's a natural path, especially in Miami, where if you can articulate your own familial story in a way that resonates with all the other people there whose families manifest similar stories, then you can go pretty far with that. And Rubio made his way onto the West Miami City Commission with relative ease. And then, within a couple years after that, he was in the Florida State House.
He became Speaker of the House, right?
Yeah, he became Speaker of the House at age 35, which is, no shade on that. That's a pretty significant accomplishment. Even if becoming Speaker of the House may have been his only significant accomplishment during the 8 years that he was in the Florida State House, he did not do much legislatively in his time there.
You said that he presented people with a book of the things we're going to do to make Florida great again or whatever, and the book was empty?
It was so stupid. He had this idea, 100 great policy ideas for Florida's future, and the book was completely empty. And the idea was that he would go around the state of Florida on a barnstorming tour and have regular citizens fill in the ideas of the book. A real hokey political stunt. But it's just sort of telling that as the legislative leader for the House, he is basically bragging about the fact that he has no ideas of his own, that he is passing the buck to the rest of the state.
So eventually, Rubio runs for Senate. He becomes the first Tea Party senator, right?
Yeah, in 2010, he could sense the Tea Party undercurrents, the rise of an uncompromising, insane conservatism that would eventually come to subsume that entire state, if not the nation. And it worked, and people were like, oh my God, Marco Rubio is Tea Party Obama, which is a fatuous comparison. But Mary, you remember the Obama era. The Republicans tried to anoint 70 different people as their own Obama until they went in the absolute other direction with Trump in 2016.
Yeah, and I feel like the shine was really off Marco Rubio, the national candidate, during the 2016 run for president when he tried to take Trump on. He was an anti-Trump Republican, but he just got owned by Trump. Despite the fact that he tried to really be brutal about taking him down in debates.
Yeah, it was embarrassing, wasn't it?
Don't worry about it, little Marco. I will.
All right, well, let's hear Big Don. Donald.
Don't worry about it, Don't worry about it, little Marco.
Gentlemen. Let's hear gentlemen.
He made fun of Trump's hand size.
He made fun of Trump's hand size, and then Trump was sitting there. In my memory, I recall a cat-like grin, oh, brother, you don't know what you're walking into right now.
Much of a lightweight. He hit my hands. Nobody has ever hit my hands. I've never heard of this one. Look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee.
Those attacks that, Rubio was leveling at Trump just did not land. And in short order, he dropped out of the race. And for a moment there was about to, not return to the Senate and just retire to private life. But I think after sitting with himself for a few days and realizing that if he's not a senator anymore, then he has to get a real job, he decided to run for the Senate again. And it's so crazy. He absolutely said at the time, he's like, well, you need someone in the Senate who can stand up to whoever is president, who can basically be a bulwark against abuses of executive power. And that did not happen.
It's so funny, though. I remember when Marco Rubio was announced as Trump's nominee for Secretary of State, there was a really palpable sense of relief from some Trump watchers who assumed, I think, he's a degular Republican. He got a totally bipartisan vote. Democrats seemed hopeful that Rubio would be the bulwark, that he said he was going to be in the Senate, but maybe wasn't.
Democrats are idiots. Look, Trump was never going to nominate anyone this second go-around who he was not 100% certain would be malleable to his wishes. There's no Rex Tillersons or Jim Mattis's or John Bolton's or anyone in this round, right? So although Rubio may have presented as a more reasonable or normal choice than the clown car parade of Hegsists and Kennedys and so on and so forth, anyone who really thought that Rubio was going to, at any point when it was critical, stand up to Trump or defend actual American values against this incursion of criminal vendettas that has come to consume so many of our policies. Anyone who believed that just was not thinking straight about what this administration was going to be and the loyalty it was going to require to anyone who sought power within it.
After the break, how Secretary of State Rubio is helping to advance Trump's agenda. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Mental health awareness is growing, but there's still progress to be made. 26% of Americans who participated in a recent survey say they have avoided seeking mental health support due to fear of judgment. When people hesitate to get help, it doesn't just affect them. It impacts families, workplaces, entire communities. This Mental Health Awareness Month, let's encourage everyone to take care of their well-being and break the stigma. BetterHelp has over 10 years of experience matching people with the right therapist from their diverse network. More than 30,000 licensed therapists with a wide range of specialties. And BetterHelp is fully online, making therapy affordable, convenient, and serving over 5 million folks all around the world. You can join a session with the click of a button and switch therapists with no extra cost. We're all better with help. Visit betterhelp.com/whatnext to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/whatnext.
Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists, like Kunle, put people at the heart of everything they create.
In the average household, there are dozens of connected devices. Here in the Comcast family, we're building an integrated in-home Wi-Fi solution for millions of families like my own. It brings people together in meaningful ways.
Kunle and his team are building a Wi-Fi experience that connects 1 billion devices every year. Learn more about how Comcast is redefining the future of connectivity at comcastcorporation.com/Wi-Fi.
The spirit of innovation is deeply ingrained in America, and Google is helping Americans innovate in ways both big and small. The Air Force Research Laboratory is partnering with Google Cloud using AI to accelerate defense research for air, space, and cyberspace forces. This is a new era of American innovation. Find out more at g.co/American innovation.
One thing I think Marco Rubio does for Donald Trump is make some of his wilder efforts sound normal. Like, as we're talking this week, there's just so much chatter about an interview Donald Trump did over this past weekend on Meet the Press, where he seemed to really not care at all if immigrants get due process in American courts. But when you go back and dig in a little bit, you'll see that the very same show, the very same interviewer, also interviewed Marco Rubio about some of the same questions about due process and immigrants like a week ago. Marco Rubio was asked about these reports that citizen children had been sent out of the country with their non-citizen mothers, their undocumented mothers. And he was asked, is there a place for due process here? And do people deserve due process? And his response was basically,
if those children are U.S. citizens, they can come back into the United States if there's their father or someone here who wants to assume them. But ultimately, who was deported was their mothers who were here illegally. The children just went with their mothers. But it wasn't like you guys make it sound like ICE agents kicked down the door and grabbed the 2-year-old and threw him on an airplane. That's misleading. Yeah. That's just not true.
Just to be clear. But it's essentially the same thing. It's like smoothing out the wrinkles in Trump's wilder statements. Does that seem fair to you?
Well, that's always been the job. Right? And we can think of a dozen, 24 people in the history of Trump's administrations. Marco Rubio is just the latest in a long line of people who, in exchange for their promotions to the roles that they hold in the administration are required to yes and the president's dumbest ideas and worst impulses, and as you said, sort of smooth them out a little bit by making them sound like components of a coherent policy project.
Yeah, you compare Marco Rubio to Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, which I think is an apt comparison because I remember last time around when Trump was in office, there was a big profile of Lindsey Graham, who'd been a real ally of John McCain and seemed to have had this total turnabout when it came to Trump. And the comparison that the writer made on Lindsey Graham was that he was a pilot fish. He was a tiny fish that looks for a bigger, stronger fish to kind of have a mutually beneficial relationship with. He sort of drafts off their momentum. And I think that's kind of what you're trying to say about Rubio as well.
Well, they're parasites. That's another way to put it, right? They're parasites. They're feeding off the energy of a larger, stronger host. And it's funny because remember January 6th, where both Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio were fairly unequivocal in their denunciations of it and their response to it. You'll remember Lindsey Graham at that, on that day, literally said something like, I'm done with this. Like, this is not okay. And Rubio, for, his part, denounced the actions of January 6th. And now here they are, right? 4 years later, and they seem to have made peace with the act that at the time was the last straw.
But we have seen a moment or two where you've watched Marco Rubio try to assert himself, not against the president, I think that's clear, but sort of against maybe the speed with which he's moving. Like, there was a widely reported Oval Office meeting a few weeks back where Rubio seemed to really take Elon Musk to task, basically saying you're moving too fast with these Doge cuts. You're coming in with sharp elbows and we're not in charge of our own departments. The two of them seemed to fight in front of Trump, and Trump seemed to declare a winner, basically, and say, okay, well, Rubio's right here. And now we see Elon Musk kind of fading into the background a little bit. But this was the first moment where I thought, like, oh, Marco Rubio is going to be a thing in his own right because he's putting himself forward and fighting for something in these Oval Office meetings and winning, even if it's, a minor victory of some kind.
If we're going to be fair, you'd rather have someone like Marco Rubio administering the State Department than a Pete Hegseth or a, Kennedy type. But, ultimately that's not the most important thing, right? He's certainly not sitting there and saying, hey, state actually works pretty well as it is. He might be approaching the program slower and more methodically than some of the other chuckleheads in other departments, but he is still very much with the program. And ultimately, that's the thing that matters.
Yeah. I mean, there are subjects where Marco Rubio seems to have had a complete turnabout, notably Ukraine, where he was a vocal critic of Russia, like just a couple years ago, and now is saying things like, oh, I don't know if we're going to have a peace deal here. And if we don't, we just got to move on. Sorry. Which seems like a big concession if you really believed Russia was a threat a few short months ago.
There was a Politico piece over the weekend where someone was quoted as sort of characterizing his state of mind that, Rubio thinks that now in his position, his job is to implement the president's policies. And if those policies conflict with his own personal preferences, then he is willing to subordinate his own goals and preferences. And, that's always part of the job when you take a cabinet seat. It always has been. The difference between right now and any other administration, even maybe, the first Trump administration, is that the policy positions are just so unconscionable and untenable that it really feels like judgment at Nuremberg type shit to sit here and say, hey, I'm just doing my job. I'm just following orders here. That's not an excuse. And that's, again, the reason why someone like Marco Rubio is in this position. Throughout his career, he has shown himself supremely willing to do what it takes to curry favor with the people who might advance his own career.
It's funny. I have two defining images of Marco Rubio from his last couple of months in office. And one is Marco Rubio at that meeting with J.D. Vance and Trump and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, the one where J.D. Vance and Trump seem to really be setting Zelensky up, just bringing him in to browbeat him in front of the American people on television. And at that meeting, it looked to me like Marco Rubio was kind of doing the live action version of the Homer in the Hedge meme. Like he was in a couch just like slowly sinking in, like not really getting involved. He seemed embarrassed almost, silent surely. But then there's another Rubio who's emerged in the last couple of months, and that's a guy who seems really proud to relish his authority to, for instance, revoke people's green cards over their political speech. And it just made me wonder, thinking about those two images, which seem maybe in conflict, is like, are we really watching two separate Rubios here? Or are we just now able to watch him assimilate in real time?
He's reconciled his ambitions with his conscience. That's what's happening here, right? And his ambition in the end is to continue to advance in the political hierarchy, to set himself up for another bid at the White House. And there'll never be a better time for him to go than in 2028. It has never left Rubio's mind that he wants to make a real play for the White House. And unlike some of the people who challenged Trump in 2016 are in this last election cycle, Rubio's not too old anymore. Rubio has continued to grow in his career. Rubio has been conspicuously remaking his image as someone who is an enthusiastic backer and participant of and in the Trump political project. And, I would not be surprised to see him try to leverage this new role in state and all the other offices that he now holds into trying to make a jump for the presidency in 2028. And it will not work. That's the sad thing. No one's going to vote for Marco Rubio for president. He'll never be president of the United States. He just won't. Because the voters can tell the difference between someone who is authentically MAGA and someone who is adopting these positions for reasons of political expediency. And that's not going to stop Rubio for making a bid for the office. But I'll say it right now, he'll never be president.
What would you want to ask Marco Rubio if you had him on the phone? Because you wrote a lot of words about him, and you clearly feel really strongly about him.
Well, I think he sucks. I mean, that's that is the strong feeling that I have.
Tell me how you really feel.
I'd probably say that about most politicians. That's not, unique to Marco Rubio. If I were to have a one-on-one with him and ask him something, where do you actually think you're going with this? Is it worth it? What would your parents think of you right now? And these are all dumb questions that are easily parried by someone who has no shame, and ultimately, in order to rise in the Trump administration, you must have no shame. I guess I just look at him and say, come on, man, really? And then they'd cut the interview and they'd make me leave. And then I'd go back home and write another Slate piece.
Justin, thanks for coming on the show.
Mary, it's always fun. Thanks for having me.
Justin Peters is a Slate correspondent and also the author of The Idealist, Aaron Schwartz and the Rise of Free Culture on the Internet. And that is our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, Madeline Ducharme, Ethan Oberman, and Isabel Angell. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky. Say hello. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.